Thank you, Piero. Thank you, everyone, for coming. It's always such a real privilege for me to be able to introduce all these talented and interesting people to you. So our first speaker is Mikey Siegel. What is consciousness hacking? Mikey Siegel is a robotics engineer turned consciousness hacker. He envisions a present and future where science and technology support psychological, emotional, and spiritual flourishing, where our devices not only connect us to information, but also connect us to ourselves and each other, acting as a catalyst for individual and collective awakening. He is currently teaching at Stanford University, the founder of Consciousness Hacking, Biofluent Technologies, and the Transformative Technology Conference. He received an MS in robotics from the MIT Media Lab. Please welcome Mikey.
Notifications off. Okay. I'm just going to leave this up here and not explain it for a while, just to add to the suspense a little bit. Okay. Great. So, hello, everybody. Hey. So, it's a pleasure to be here. This is my my third time doing a talk through this wonderful program, and the reason why it's so exciting for me is because it's bringing some things together that I'm really passionate about. I'm used to giving talks in more sort of spiritual circles or well-being circles or meditation circles. And then I sometimes give talks in engineering circles and scientist circles, but I rarely get to bring these things together. And actually, in a way, I'm trying something a little bit edgy for this talk. So I hope you'll bear with me. In a way, I'm kind of like I'm sort of showing up naked, not literally, obviously, but usually for a talk like this, I would very rigidly sort of prepare every single slide and every single thing I was going to say and every single point and make sure it was totally consistent so that everybody totally understood every single part, and it would really be speaking from my mind. And I want to try something a little bit different with you today, if you will tolerate it. You don't really have a choice. But I'd like to try speaking a little bit more from my heart. Because what I'm going to be presenting to you today is not a bunch of facts or figures or trying to prove a particular logical point. What I'm going to be presenting to you is really more of a personal plea. It's not just a deep passion of mine, but it's something that I actually believe is deeply important for humanity. And what I'm going to be talking about, I might need an assistant who just moves my mouse every minute, or finds my plug in the backpack. What I'm going to be talking about is the role of technology in supporting well-being and connection on the planet. And for me, in a sense, this is one of the most important things that I can imagine science and technology doing for us. But I didn't start there. And so to kind of give a sense of where I'm coming from, I want to tell a little bit of a story about where I kind of came from. I did my graduate work in robotics at the MIT Media Lab. And we were working with these social robots that have facial expressions and were engineered to be a human interface to technology. And one of the things that we would always discuss as grad students sitting around in the lab late at night was what's the ultimate purpose for these robots? What are they good for? Because we had the mental part of it. We had this sort of problem-solving excitement of creating something new, of innovating, of building something that no one had ever built before. But invariably, we'd have to give some talk at some university, and we'd talk about all the cool technological achievements that we'd made. But then, at the end of the talk, we'd always have to answer the question, why? Why are you making this? And it was always this sort of late-night kind of pondering where we were really just trying to fill in the blank. We knew we had to answer that question, so it would be like, well, maybe it's like elderly people in Japan. They need social robots. And we would just kind of make up anything that sounded good. And I would kind of follow along with that. And I left graduate school never really having a sense of why. Like, what was this technology good for? Why was it important? Why was I building it? But the other thing that happened was when I left graduate school, and I had sort of checked all these things off my list, all the things that I thought would make me happy. I just finished school at MIT, and my mom was super happy with me, and I had just gotten a good job. And I had to come to terms with the fact that I felt like crap. I felt disconnected. I felt anxious. Had I decided to get a clinical diagnosis at a time, I would have probably been diagnosed as depressed. And I was faced with this real disparity. That I had everything that I thought would make me happy, yet I wasn't happy. And I was lucky enough to find myself in a yoga ashram in Virginia called Yogaville. It's amazing. It's everything you would imagine Yogaville would be, gurus and all. But what it was the first exposure to me of my inner world. Because as an engineer, I had been completely focused on solving problems out there. And I thought that if I could just get things right, then I could be happy. And what I realized is I had been missing half of the equation. That actually, it was my own inner experience, my mind, my emotions, my thoughts, my relationship to myself that was the single greatest mediator of my own experience, of my happiness, of my well-being. But the other thing I realized as an engineer was really important. Was that there were actual tools that I could use to reliably shift my experience. And many of these tools had been around for thousands of years. I'm talking about meditation, yoga, breath, and even in a modern sense, we have psychotherapeutic approaches, talk therapy, somatic therapy, right? There are actual things, human creations, that I could rely on to change my relationship to reality. But I realized there was this disparity. Because when I looked at the options of what I could do as an engineer, what I could create as an engineer, they looked very, very different. There was this huge divide between the focus of science and technology and engineering and the focus of meditation and spirituality and well-being. But it was very clear to me that there was nothing that I would rather work on as an engineer than supporting well-being in the world. And so I sort of embarked on this path of what you could call consciousness hacking or transformative technology, and I immediately thought, well, maybe the way I could do it is I could go back to graduate school, and I could apply to study it there. And I looked at what was out there, and what's out there, and actually quite prevalent, is understanding the science of well-being. You have both on the positive psychology side, understanding what makes people happy, but also now this rapidly growing area of contemplative science, which is the study of meditation as it relates to the brain and the body. And so I would apply to all of these different graduate programs and write these professors, and what I would say is, I want to do applied contemplative science. I want to take the scientific understanding of what it means to be happy, and I want to actually develop new innovative approaches using technology to actually support happiness in the world. And nobody knew what I was talking about. It was like blank stares. It was like I was talking about like aliens or something like that. Because at the time, especially 7 years ago, this was pretty much unheard of. And so in many ways, I've had to chart my own path. And I continue often to get blank stares. And it makes sense, because if we look at this, the last thing that we think of is well-being. In many ways, this technology is actually designed to distract us. If it doesn't distract you, you have to take it back to the Apple store to get it fixed. Because that's kind of its whole point, right? But not just to distract you, but to actually hold and maintain your attention. Because what we exist in is something like an attentional economy or attention warfare even, where everything around you is vying for your attention because attention is tied to profit. And so when the system is optimized, where the more your attention can be held, the more profit can be made, without any real interest or relevance in terms of how you feel or what's good for you, then you have systems with brilliant engineers getting better and better and better and better and better at addicting you to your gadgets and your technology. But this is not an inherent quality of technology. This is actually how we designed it. These are design decisions that we've made as a function of the system that we've created. And what I've started to realize through my efforts and through the world that I live in is that actually modern technology can be one of the most powerful tools imaginable for supporting well-being. But it's not just one of the most powerful tools imaginable, it's one of the most important tools. And there's something I want to describe to you that I call the transformative technology imperative. And what it looks like is this. Technology is becoming increasingly ubiquitous. The recent statistic is that on average in the United States, we spend 10 hours and 39 minutes per day in front of a screen. And that technology is mediating more and more and more of our life and more of our experience. And if the system is optimized to hold attention and influence us, then it's not just that almost every aspect of our life is being mediated, but it's being mediated in a way that's designed to shape how we think, how we feel, and what we do. So this is not just about lowering stress or making some people feel better. This is actually about recognizing that if technology is the most potent form of human influence on the planet, then if we don't design it to support well-being, then in a way we're totally screwing ourselves. And so I want to kind of illustrate what I'm even talking about by technology that can support well-being. So this is a video of last weekend in Mexico. And this is a project I'm working on, if I can find my mouse, there it is. This is a project I'm working on called the Group Flow Project. And this is, what you're seeing here are two people being guided through a meditation process where they are not just experiencing their own heartbeat, hearing their heartbeat through headphones, and then holding their heart in their hand, but then there's a point at which they begin to actually hear their neighbor's heart, and to actually feel their neighbor's heart, and actually hold their neighbor's heart in their hand. And many people start spontaneously crying, or feeling more connected to another human being than they've ever felt before. Because not only is this the first time that they've heard their own heart, but then when they hear the heart of another person, they realize that that is another human being. They realize that they are actually the same in a certain way. And my greatest hope for technology is to help us realize this sameness, to help us connect to each other, to actually deepen and build that relationship with ourselves, but also to find that with other human beings. And the path forward that I see, which I believe is true for every human domain, is based on this idea that we are what we build and we build what we are. I don't believe it's possible to just create new technologies that support well-being from the mind alone. I actually believe that, and this is beginning to be true in contemplative science as well, that, for example, if you want to study meditation, you have to practice meditation, right? And if you want to be able to create new technologies for well-being, you need to actually explore well-being within yourself. And this is the new space of entrepreneurship that is beginning to be ushered in. And it's beautiful. There's a conference that I co-founded called the Transformative Technology Conference, which is sort of the gathering point in Silicon Valley for these ideas. And what you're finding is that the organizations that prioritize meditation and connection are actually able to channel and create these new innovative apps and VR devices and wearables that support meditation and connection from that direct experience. And actually, the thing that I'm really excited about is a class that we're coming out with pretty soon through the Wellness Education Program. That's 40 classes at Stanford, all devoted to well-being. And the class is called Designing Wellbeing. And we're collaborating with the head of design at LinkedIn internationally. And she works at LinkedIn and then lives at a monastery, a Zen monastery, full-time. And this is the future for me. And the focus of the class is around how do we design from our own experience? How do we deepen our sense of well-being and create from that place? And so my greatest hope for the world is that we can create a feedback loop where we know ourselves and connect to ourselves more deeply. And from that place, we create technologies that are optimized more and more for human well-being. So thank you. Yes?
Thank you. With the changes that have occurred in our environment over the last 100 years,
Yeah.
and with automation taking over a lot of the functions that we as people have been doing, with robots doing more of that, and with all of the things that are happening, can you give me a vision of what you think 20 years from now we 9 billion people will look like, and what will we be doing?
Yeah. Thank you. So 20 years from now, what's the vision of what we might look like? So first thing I want to say is I have this kind of motto that I have a responsibility to be an optimist. And what I mean by that is that I recognize there's a lot of possibilities, right? And in a way, the possibilities that I think about the most are the ones I'm helping to create. Because that's where my attention is going, that's where my energy is going. So the way I'll answer your question is, what is the reality that I feel can be most likely, in the way, or the one that I want to be most likely, right? I overheard some people talking about the singularity, I think, right around this area. And I'll paint a little bit of a sci-fi picture for you. I think that we are getting closer and closer and closer to connecting our minds to reality itself. Meaning, the gap between what we want and what exists is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. You see that in, for example, increasingly realistic virtual reality environments, where pretty soon we won't be able to discern what's real and what's not, right? The gap will get smaller and smaller, right? And what I believe will be increasingly exposed to us as that gap gets smaller and smaller and smaller is that all we really want is to feel at home in this experience, to feel connected, to feel alive, to feel whole. And every single thing that we're doing is, whether skillful or not, some attempt to get there. And right now, that's not very clear to us. It feels like we're kind of doing this, and I'm going to the gym, and then I'm going to work, and I'm going to make some money, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this. And it feels all very separate, like we have all these sort of missions we're trying to accomplish. But I actually believe they all come down ultimately to that. And I think that we will be forced to realize that as the gap between what we want and what we have becomes narrower and narrower and narrower. I also believe at the same time, it will become more clear to industry that the desire for well-being is the greatest need on the planet and would be the biggest, most successful industry imaginable if that need could be met. And right now we're trying to meet it indirectly by giving people food that they crave because they're avoiding their own emotions, right? Or giving people media or entertainment that they're using to avoid something else, right? But if we can meet that need directly, if we can find ways to actually support real, deep, meaningful connection to ourselves and each other using technology or whatever means, that would be the most desirable and most demanded thing on the planet. And so my greatest hope is that we realize that really quickly. Because it's not just that we have an unhappy world, and the statistics on depression, anxiety, loneliness are horrific. But there's another more significant thing. There's a quote that I really love from the United Nations, and it says, "Since wars begin in the minds of men, it's in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed." Fearful, greedy, disconnected people, and I'm one of them, perpetuate a fearful, greedy, disconnected world. We create in our image. And so there is a possibility of changing the world from the inside out. And so that's my greatest hope, if that is a long answer to your question. Okay, I think, any other questions? Yes, in the back.
Can you please use the microphone? Sorry about that. If you can just press the button on the microphone, that would be fantastic.
I think it was working. Oh, it was. Okay.
Hi, I just wanted to make a comment. I teach mindfulness in a high school in San Jose, large public high school, and I just see how addicted kids are to their phones.
Yeah.
And I see them addicted to their video games, and it's really hard for them to put down their technology at all. And I do see the rising anxiety, distraction, and difficulties. But I worry about, it's like, okay, so now we're going to try to monetize mindfulness, you know, something that's been going on for thousands of years. And, you know, I mean, I just feel like, you know, how are you going to shift that whole paradigm of how we basically monetize suffering, you know, by giving kids and others these, you know, baubles and distractions and things that are actually tend to be harmful to them, you know, and with the promise that next time this is the thing that's really gonna do it for you, you know? And it just seems like kids really need those connections, and that, you know, I loved what you said about your connection to yourself and that internal world, and giving kids and others that, just the space to do that. So I do have hope that technology will shift. I just hope it happens soon.
Yeah.
And thank you for your work, and I'm really interested.
Yeah, thank you. And a quick answer to your question, which is a big one. We can kind of look to the food industry, because the food industry is exactly the same. You have an industry where the consumption of food is tied to profit, not health. Just like the consumption of content is tied to profit, not well-being or mental health. And if you had only ever seen McDonald's, it would be really, really hard for you to imagine how food could ever be healthy, right? Just like if you'd only ever seen an iPhone, it would be really hard to imagine how technology could be a tool for well-being. But what you're seeing is a combination of things. You're seeing a shift in the market demand for health, and a recognition by the public that actually, no, we won't settle, we actually want to be healthy. And I think you're starting to see that same shift, and that's at the physical level, and you're starting to see that same shift at the mental, psychological, emotional, spiritual level, right? But the flip side of it is you, in parallel, build the new thing, right? You create the alternate competition that has the beneficial aspects that we're looking for. And so I think from the tech front, what is needed and is already beginning to happen are really well-funded companies and projects and technologies that are creating, for example, games that are as well designed as the best funded games that are out there. But the way you win the game is by connecting to yourself, is by becoming more emotionally aware, is by connecting to other people, is by fostering and deepening compassion and mindfulness, right? And there is no limitation to doing that. All that's needed is the same kind of resource and design skill applied to that focus that you have in, you know, games that are designed to be addictive where you're shooting zombies. You know.
Okay, I have to interrupt.
Okay, yes.
Thank you very much
Thank you.
for a great talk.